All right, let's level up. We're going deep on Atomic Habits today. It's a James Clear's book.
Oh, yeah.
The one all about tiny actions.
Yeah.
Snowballing into big results. We'll dig into excerpts, insights, all that good stuff.
Right.
That'll make you think, why didn't I start this sooner?
I think what's really fascinating about the book is how it kind of changes our thinking about habits. We often think about them as these big monumental things, but the magic's really in those small, 1% improvements.
Yeah.
It's almost like compound interest, but for self-improvement.
It made me think about that British cycling team that Clear talks about, the one that went from kind of average to dominating the Olympics and the Tour de France. Did they just wake up late and decide to be amazing?
Well, they have this secret weapon, their coach, Sir Dave Brailsford.
Okay.
And he was obsessed with finding these tiny improvements in every single part of their training.
Really?
Everything. We're talking redesigned bike seats.
Oh, wow.
Better sleep. Even the best hand washing techniques to avoid getting sick.
Hand washing? Really? I mean, staying healthy, sure, but
Yeah.
that seems a bit much now.
It might seem small, but think about it. Even a little cold can set an athlete back, for days.
Yeah, that's true.
Brailsford thought that optimizing every single thing, even the tiny stuff, would add up to big improvements over time.
So their goal wasn't win the Olympics. It was
Yeah.
be 1% better at everything.
That's it. You got it. And they weren't aiming for huge changes, just little tweaks that added up to make a massive difference. And that's the power you can tap into.
Yeah.
Clearly emphasizes building systems, not just focusing on the goal.
Right.
The British cycling team, they focused on their system
Okay.
of making these tiny improvements. And the goals, winning, that just happened naturally.
Wow, that's a totally different way to think about it.
Yeah.
It's not about saying, I want to write a novel. It's
Right.
I'm going to make a system for writing every day.
Exactly. You're shifting from what do I want to achieve to
Okay.
who do I need to become? It's the difference between saying I want to lose weight and I'm becoming the kind of person who eats healthy and exercises.
Okay, yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
But how do we actually create those systems? Are there steps we can take?
Well, Clear outlines these 4 laws of behavior change.
Okay.
And they're actually really practical and easy to use.
Okay.
So the first one is make it obvious. Let's say you want to meditate every morning.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying, I'll meditate today, you get specific. I'll meditate for 5 minutes right after I pour my first cup of coffee.
So you're connecting the new habit to something you already do consistently.
Exactly. And then the second law is make it attractive.
Okay.
Think about something you really enjoy, like listening to a podcast or an audiobook.
Right.
You only let yourself do that while you're doing the new habit you're trying to build. It's like a reward system.
That's interesting. But is that sustainable long-term? What happens when it's not new anymore?
Well, that's where the third law comes in. Make it easy. A lot of people trip up because they try to do too much too soon.
Yeah.
Say you want to start flossing regularly.
Yeah.
Don't try to floss your whole mouth on day 1. Just
Right.
start with 1 tooth.
Okay, I can handle that. But
Right.
isn't there a risk of getting discouraged if the progress is so tiny?
Yeah.
How do you stay motivated when you're only flossing 1 tooth?
That's where the fourth law comes in. Make it satisfying. It's about creating a feeling of reward, even for those small wins.
Okay.
You could use a habit tracker app, mark it on a calendar,
Yeah.
or just picture yourself reaching your goal.
So even just a visual reminder can give you that feeling of accomplishment.
Absolutely. Think of it like a progress bar in a video game.
Yeah.
Each little step fills up the bar a bit more, and that keeps you motivated.
Okay, I see how this all fits together now.
Yeah.
It's not about willpower. It's about designing a system
Exactly.
that helps you do what you want to do.
We often overestimate the role of motivation and underestimate the power of the environment in designing our system. We forget that we're really products of our environment.
Okay.
And our habits are shaped by the things around us.
So if I want to eat healthier, I shouldn't keep a bowl of candy on my desk.
Right. It's like setting yourself up to fail.
Yeah.
Your environment is always giving you cues, whether you realize it or not. Clear talks about this study in Pakistan where they wanted to get people to wash their hands more.
Yeah.
Just changing how the soap dispensers looked and where they were
Okay.
made a big difference. So if you want to eat healthier, swap the candy for a bowl of fruit or some pre-cut veggies.
Make the healthy choice, the easy choice.
Exactly.
That's like using your environment to your advantage.
Yeah.
But even with the best system, we're human.
Yeah.
We slip up sometimes. What happens when we break the chain, miss a day,
Right.
even a week?
Well, Clear says never miss twice.
Okay.
If you miss a day, don't beat yourself up about it. Just get back on track as soon as you can.
Right.
The important thing is to not let one slip up turn into a bunch of missed opportunities.
Okay, that takes the pressure off a bit.
Yeah,
So it's not about being perfect.
right.
It's about being resilient and getting back on track.
Exactly.
There's one thing I'm still kind of struggling with, though.
Yeah.
This idea of identity and how it connects to our habits. Claire says we need to believe we are the type of person who has those good habits.
Yeah, he uses this great analogy in the book. He says, the goal is not to read a book, the goal is to become a reader.
Okay.
It's not just about doing the thing, it's about who you become while you're doing it.
I get the become a reader thing,
Yeah.
but I'm not always consistent. Any advice for someone like me?
Well, one powerful way to change your identity is to act as if. Like, let's say you want to be a more confident public speaker.
Okay.
Start acting like you already are, even if you don't feel it at first.
Okay.
Prepare really well, practice how you'll deliver it.
Right.
Imagine yourself succeeding.
So by acting as if you're like tricking your brain into thinking it's already true.
Yeah, exactly. And over time, that just becomes part of who you are. It's not about forcing yourself. It's about your actions and your identity lining up. Remember how James Clear used these principles himself after that awful injury in high school?
Right. The broken nose in his eye, like bulging out. It's amazing he even recovered, let alone like did everything he did after. How do you use these principles with something so like traumatic?
It's a really inspiring story of resilience. He was bedridden for months and couldn't even drive for 8 months. But he started small, focusing on tiny habits he could control. Things like organizing his dorm room, getting better sleep, studying consistently.
So instead of focusing on what he couldn't do, he created a sense of order
Right.
in the areas he could cook.
Exactly. And those little wins helped him regain control, build momentum. Eventually, he got back to baseball, not just playing, but excelling. And it didn't stop there. Those small habits helped him do great in college. He even earned the university's highest academic honor. It shows you that you can apply these principles to anything.
It's incredible how those little habits became such huge results. But let's go back to cravings. You said they aren't just desires. They're like predictions our brains make about rewards. So it's not just wanting something, it's our brain expecting a specific outcome.
And what's really cool is that we can reprogram our brains to enjoy those hard habits by changing our predictions.
Wait, so you're saying I can train myself to actually like going to the gym? That seems impossible.
Well, it's not magic, but it's about shifting your perspective. Instead of thinking, oh, I have to go to the gym, you think, I get to go to the gym.
I think I see what you mean. It's about focusing on the good stuff, the energy boost, the feeling of strength, the stress relief, instead of just the effort.
Exactly. You're basically hacking your brain to see the good side of the habit.
Okay.
And this goes for anything. Saving money isn't about sacrificing. It's about future freedom. Eating healthy isn't about deprivation. It's about nourishing your body and feeling good.
So it's like changing the whole story around those habits.
Yeah.
Making them seem better and ultimately, easier to stick with.
Exactly. But how does this fit in with Clear's 4 laws of behavior change?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, this reframing, it goes perfectly with the second law, make it attractive. By changing how we think and feel about a habit, we're making it more appealing to our brains. But it's not just about internal rewards, it's also about our social environment.
So are we talking peer pressure? Like, if all my friends are marathon runners, I'm more likely to start running too.
It's a bit more than just peer pressure. Clear explains that we tend to copy the habits of 3 groups: the close, the many, and the powerful.
Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. So the close are our family and friends, the people we see all the time.
Okay.
The many are the bigger group we're part of, like our social circles or interest groups. And the powerful are those with status, people we look up to. We unconsciously adopt behaviors that are praised by these groups.
So if I want to build better habits, surrounding myself with people who already have those habits could be a game changer.
Absolutely. Joining a culture where your desired behavior is normal can make a huge difference. Imagine if everyone around you goes for a run after work. It just becomes the thing to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. But what if I don't have a group like that right now? Can I still use social influence?
Definitely. You can find online communities, join a class, or even just share your progress publicly that can create accountability and support.
Okay.
Even just having one accountability partner can make a big difference. And that brings us back to Clear's 4th law, make it satisfying. Having someone to celebrate with, or just knowing someone's watching your progress, can make those habits more rewarding.
This is all so interconnected. It's not just about willpower or motivation. It's about creating a whole environment that supports our habits. But even with the best systems, sometimes those habits feel tough, especially when they become routine. We talked about how the excitement fades and boredom can set in. What does Clear say about that?
That's where he talks about the Goldilocks rule.
The Goldilocks rule.
Yeah, it's about finding that perfect level of challenge that keeps you engaged.
So not too hard, not too easy, just right.
You got it. We're most motivated when we're working on things that are just a bit beyond our current abilities, challenging enough to keep us interested, but not so hard that we give up.
So how do we find that sweet spot? Does it change?
It definitely does. As you get better, you need to keep adjusting the challenge. Clear talks about elite athletes who are always pushing their limits, even when they're already amazing. It's about expanding your comfort zone. And that leads to another important point: deliberate practice.
Deliberate practice. Is that different from just, doing the habit?
There's a subtle difference. Habits are about doing things without thinking.
Right.
Deliberate practice is about focused effort and getting better. It's about paying attention to the details, finding weaknesses, and improving your technique.
So it's not just going through the motions.
Right.
It's about being present and looking for ways to improve.
Exactly. It's like the difference between passively watching a movie and actively analyzing it.
Okay.
One is just entertainment, the other is learning.
That's a great way to put it. So how do we use this to build better habits?
Think about it like this. You're learning piano. You practice scales and chords until they're automatic. That's the habit part.
Okay.
But to be really good, you need to go beyond that and focus on technique and expression. That's deliberate practice. You're layering it on top of those basic habits.
So once a habit is automatic, we need to shift to actively improving it.
Exactly. And one of the best ways to do that is through reflection and review. Clear talks about regularly checking your progress, finding areas to improve, and making adjustments. He even shares specific strategies like doing an annual review or an integrity report.
What are those?
So in the annual review, you look back to the past year and think about what went well, what didn't, and what you learned. It's a chance to celebrate your wins, but also acknowledge setbacks and find areas to grow.
Hmm.
The integrity report is like a mid-year check-in where you see if your actions match your values and goals.
Those sound like good ways to make sure your habits are actually helping you.
They are, and they remind me of this example Clear shares. It's called the Career Best Effort Program. It was used by Pat Riley, the legendary basketball coach with the LA Lakers.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What was that, and how did it connect to Atomic Habits?
Riley was obsessed with getting his players to consistently play their best. He tracked their data, figured out their baseline, and then challenged them to improve by just 1% over the season.
Wait, just 1%? That doesn't seem like much.
That's the point. Those tiny improvements, done consistently, led to amazing results. The Lakers won a bunch of championships with Riley. It's another example of atomic habits in action: small changes, big results.
It's like they say Rome wasn't built in a day. But you mentioned that Clear also talks about the potential downside of habits. Like, how can good habits have a bad side?
Well, it's kind of a paradox. While habits help us master things, they can also make us complacent. We get so good at doing things automatically that we stop paying attention. We get stuck in a rut, and that can actually hold us back.
So we think we're getting better just because we're doing the habit.
Exactly. That's why it's important to balance habits with deliberate practice. It's about finding that sweet spot between automation and improvement. Once a habit is automatic, we need to focus on actively refining it.
So we're always trying to be a little bit better than yesterday.
Exactly. And that brings us back to reflection and review. By regularly looking at our habits, we can find areas where we've gotten complacent and start making small changes to keep improving. But there's one more thing they haven't talked about: the role of our genes and personality in shaping our habits.
Okay, now this is getting interesting. Are you saying we're, like, predisposed to certain habits based on our genes?
This is where Clear gets into the whole nature versus nature thing. While our genes don't completely control us, they do influence our tendencies.
So some people are just naturally more likely to be, say, morning people or introverts.
Exactly. And this matters for how we approach habit change. Clear says that we're more likely to succeed if we choose habits that align with our natural abilities.
So instead of fighting against our nature, we should work with it.
Think about it. If you're naturally introverted, trying to force yourself to be super social might not work.
Right.
But you could use your introverted strength by developing habits that support deep focus and working alone. It's about playing to your strengths instead of trying to be someone you're not.
That makes a lot of sense. But how do we figure out our personality traits?
There are a bunch of personality tests online.
Yeah.
Some are free, some you have to pay for. But even just thinking about your past experiences and noticing patterns can help.
So it's about paying attention to who we are and what we naturally like.
Exactly. It's about working with your personality, not against it. And speaking of working with the grain, let's talk about choosing the right habits in the first place.
That was my next question. What if we don't even know what those are? What if we're still figuring things out?
That's where Clear talks about the explore-exploit trade-off. He says that when you're starting something new, it's important to explore different options.
Okay.
Try new things, experiment, and see what you like.
So it's like casting a wide net to see what you catch.
Exactly. And once you've found something that seems good, you can focus on exploiting that opportunity, refining your skills, building systems, and making those 1% improvements. It's about balancing exploration with focused effort.
So it's about being open to new things while also having the discipline to stick with what works.
Yeah, it's not just about changing our habits. It's about understanding ourselves and creating a life that fits who we are.
This is such good advice.
And that's what's so great about Atomic Habits. It's not just a self-help book. It's a guide to understanding how we behave and unlocking our potential. But before we finish this deep dive, there's one more cool concept we haven't talked about yet.
Okay, you mentioned one last concept.
Yeah, remember those supernormal stimuli we talked about?
Yeah.
Those like exaggerated versions of reality that kind of hijack our brains?
Right.
Well, Clear says that modern society is basically one giant supernormal stimulus.
So my brain's like a lab rat being messed with by Doritos.
Yeah.
That explains a lot. But really, how is modern society a supernormal stimulus?
Well, think about it. We're constantly surrounded by temptations that, like, our ancestors never had.
Right.
Junk food, social media, streaming services.
Yeah.
They're designed to give us instant gratification and keep us hooked.
It's like our brains are still wired for a world where those temptations were rare.
Right.
No wonder it's so hard to resist, like another slice of pizza or
Yeah.
scrolling through social media for hours.
Exactly. And that's why it's so tough to stick with habits that, like, need delayed gratification.
Yeah.
Things like saving money, eating healthy, or going after long-term goals.
Right.
Our brains are still looking for those quick dopamine hits.
So how do we deal with this mismatch between our old brains and our modern world?
Well, it's not easy, but we're not helpless against it. This is where clear strategies for making habits attractive and satisfying come in.
Okay.
Remember, we can kind of hack our brains to connect good feelings with those habits that need delayed gratification.
So it's not about denying ourselves pleasure.
Right.
It's about finding ways to make those long-term rewards more like enticing.
Exactly. One way to do that is with something called temptation bundling.
Temptation bundling? What's that?
It's pairing something you want to do with something you need to do.
Okay.
Like, you only let yourself watch your favorite show while you're on the treadmill.
Oh, I see.
Or you listen to an audiobook you've been wanting to read while you're doing chores.
It's like giving yourself a reward for
Yeah.
doing those necessary but not always fun things.
Exactly. By connecting pleasure to those less enjoyable activities, you're training your brain to want them.
That's pretty clever.
But it's not just about external rewards. Remember those visual measures of progress?
Oh, right. Like that guy who moved paper clips from one jar to another
Yeah.
to track his sales calls.
Yeah.
Seems a bit silly.
Right.
But it worked for him.
It did. It's about making your progress real and visible.
Okay.
It could be as simple as marking an X on a calendar
Yeah.
every day you do your habit,
Right.
or using an app to track your workouts or savings.
So it's like giving yourself that little dopamine boost each
Yeah.
time you see how far you've come.
Exactly. But it's not just about the dopamine. It's
Yeah.
also about accountability. Seeing those reminders keeps you honest
Right.
and helps you stay motivated.
You're right. It's not just about willpower or motivation. It's about setting up your whole environment to support those habits. But even then, I think we've all felt that
Yeah,
even with the best systems, sometimes like habits can just feel hard,
absolutely.
especially when they become like routine. We talked about how the initial excitement fades and boredom can set in.
Right.
What does Clear suggest for those times?
Well, this is where he brings up the idea that happiness isn't a destination, it's a process.
So it's not about reaching some perfect state of happiness.
Right.
It's about finding joy in the journey itself.
Exactly. He quotes Seneca, who said, "Being poor is not having too little, it is wanting more."
Oh, wow.
It's not about what we have, it's about how we see what we have.
I love that. It's a good reminder that we already have what we need to be happy.
Yeah.
It's just about changing our perspective.
And that's really the core message of Atomic Habits. We can all make positive changes, one small habit at a time.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I've learned so much about building better habits
Yeah.
and living a more fulfilling life.
Absolutely. This book is full of great insights.
It really is. Remember, it all starts with one small step.
That's it.
What little change are you going to make today?
Yeah.
Let us know in the comments, and be sure to share this deep dive with anyone who's ready to level up their life.
Absolutely.
Until next time, happy habit building.